I'm going to begin.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much.
So, Lucy, just give me 2 minutes. I'm going to introduce. So, hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Aarti Gupta, and I'm the Programs Chair for Harvard Global We. I will be facilitating this session featuring the Freedom Story. Thank you to the representatives, Lucy, for joining us today for today's event. After I introduce them, they will make a brief presentation, and after the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask the speaker questions until the session ends. So today we have with us Lucy, who's going to talk about the Freedom Story. Over to you, Lucy. You have 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Freedom Story and the work that we do here in Thailand. One of the great benefits, I think, of post-pandemic life is that I'm actually calling in from Thailand. So it's really nice to be able to connect with you all virtually. I'm Lucy. I've been out here in Thailand for the last 9 years. I've been working with Freedom Story for the last 7 years. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and share my presentation. Let me do this. Right. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Perfect. Awesome. And you see the full screen, right? Not the presenter view.
No, we can see the full screen.
Great. Awesome. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Lucy. I work with Freedom Story. I've been working with Freedom Story for the last 7 years. When I first moved to Thailand, I was working with victims who had children who had been sexually abused. And it was through really meeting those children and meeting their families that I saw the importance of prevention. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm really excited that the focus for this year's theme is all about innovation and supporting women for sustainability, because those are really important tenets of the work of Freedom Story. So I think many of us are familiar with trafficking. It is estimated that trafficking impacts about 50 million people globally right now. 70% of those people are women and girls, and about 1 in 4 are children. So 50 million is a number that I think we can't really wrap our minds around. It's too big for us to really understand. But it is impacting children and women all over the world right now, in every country of the world. And in northern Thailand and in Thailand, children are exploited for sex. In Bangkok and beyond, children are exploited in labor for things like construction, agriculture, and fishing. And there's this new phenomenon that we're seeing in special economic zones that are popping up throughout Southeast Asia, where people are being trafficked to these areas thinking that they're getting good online jobs and are actually being forced to commit scams and crimes on behalf of their traffickers under the threat of extreme violence. So this is a new form of trafficking, one of the most violent forms of trafficking I've ever seen, that's popped up after the pandemic in the last 2 to 3 years. So it's kind of a new challenge for us with Freedom Story. I'd like to tell a story today of some incredible women that I know as part of our programming, and help to kind of illustrate some of the work that we do here in Thailand. So this is Sarah. She's in the purple jumper on the back of the motorbike, and in the front is her mother. Growing up, Sarah lived with her parents, an aunt, 4 grandparents, and a total of 4 children in their home here in northern Thailand. With both parents working and their aunt working occasionally, they were able to make ends meet just about. But when Sarah's father died when she was 10, it meant that the family was really now relying only on their mom for income, for 4 grandparents, 4 children, and then sometimes their aunt was able to work. Her mom is probably one of the most hardworking people that I know. She wakes up at 3 in the morning, prepares grilled pork, which is like a traditional breakfast here in Thailand, and goes and sells that at the market until 9 a.m. She then goes to their pineapple farm, where you can see she's getting ready to go in this picture, and works on their pineapple farm from 9 until about 3. And then she drives her crepe stand to the local market and sells crepes for the after school and after work crowd until sometimes midnight. And even with all of these different streams of income and this incredibly hardworking, determined woman, there was not enough money for the family to survive. And there wasn't enough money for the family to be able to keep all of the children in school. In Thailand, you have to pay for all sorts of things for children, uniforms and books and transportation, but also things like air conditioning in a classroom, something that children have no choice over. Sometimes if your student has a foreign teacher, you have to pay for that. Again, not something that families have any control over. So Sarah's mom came to her with a very difficult ask. As the oldest child, and especially as the oldest girl, she asked Sarah to drop out of school to start to work in order to help support her younger siblings and her grandparents who were no longer able to work. We can see how even with Sarah's mom working that hard, jobs that provide enough income for low educated and low skilled workers in northern Thailand are just not giving enough income for children in order to really support their families. So it's very easy for children who have low levels of education and low skills to be trafficked and to be exploited. And so when Sarah was asked to drop out of school, she immediately became much more at risk. Her family are also ethnic minority members and face a lot of discrimination, and that really heightens their risk of exploitation as well. I think often in the media, trafficking is kind of portrayed as something that is random, that children are kidnapped off the side of a school bus, for example, like taken. People are trafficked because they're kidnapped, or it's kind of random. But what we actually know through our work and through research is that traffickers are looking for vulnerable people. It wouldn't make sense for them to try to randomly traffic people. They're looking for people that are from a vulnerable profile. And that is something that was true for Sarah. She had become vulnerable to trafficking because of her circumstances. When we talk about trafficking vulnerability, we talk about risk factors. So just like you have risk factors for certain diseases, if you take a public health approach to trafficking, we can see that there are many risk factors that compound to put children at risk. Poverty, like Sarah's family, causes many children to drop out of school with low levels of education. They're just not eligible for the types of jobs that keep them safe. Girls are often more at risk of trafficking than boys. Like we said, over 70% of people that are trafficked are women and girls. People with histories of abuse, people from ethnic minority groups, people with families who have a history of trafficking, or children facing family breakdown, for example, like Sarah's family after her father passed away, all are at greater risk of trafficking. In countries throughout the world, including in Thailand, there are laws on the books against trafficking, but these laws are not universally enforced. And so that puts people at risk of trafficking as well. And then any kind of shock, stress, or uncertainty also puts people at risk of trafficking. We have a civil war going on in Myanmar, the country that borders Thailand. And then the COVID pandemic drastically increased risk of trafficking because people lost their economic buffer and they kind of lost any foothold that they might have had to protect themselves. Freedom Story exists to ensure that children like Sarah never experience trafficking and exploitation. And we do that through programs that are really owned and led by our local staff. I always say I'm a terrible representative of Freedom Story because it's really our 30+ Thai staff that run and design all of our programs. These programs are specifically targeted at addressing those risk factors to ensure that children like Sarah and her family can overcome their risk, become more resilient, and then really thrive in their environments. So somebody in Sarah's community recommended that she apply to Freedom Story. She was immediately accepted because we saw how at risk she was. She started to receive a monthly scholarship to ensure that she had the finances needed to stay in school. She got a mentor, somebody from her ethnic minority group, to be that stable adult relationship, somebody she could turn to if she started to be groomed online or if she was offered a job that seemed too good to be true. And research has shown, actually research out of Harvard has shown that children who have stable adult relationships from at-risk situations are much more likely to develop resilience. And resilience is a really key tool for the students that we work with to help them overcome their risk. We have human rights programs that ensure Sarah and her family know what their rights are and can access those rights and can identify and report cases of trafficking. And then importantly, for children and family like Sarah's, poverty is really the underlying risk factor that drives their vulnerability. So that pineapple farm that I mentioned, normally they're able to export their pineapples for 25 cents per kilo. But during the pandemic, exports became almost impossible and the price of pineapples dropped to less than a cent per kilo. So you can see how that would just totally wipe away years of your income. So we came alongside Sarah and her family, and we knew that with 4 grandparents at home who maybe weren't able to do physical work, hard work, they would be able to take care of chickens. So this is Sarah and her grandfather, who's very sweet. And we were able to help them set up a small chicken business where they can sell the eggs in their community for an extra source of income for the family. We're really committed to evaluating our programs, and we know prevention is working. 89% of our 450 students have graduated compared to 75% of their peers. We've reached more than 25,000 people through our human rights program, and we have offered more than 45,000 hours of mentorship and resources to at-risk children since we opened in 2008. Sarah is now at university. She's studying agricultural development, and she is a very bright and hardworking young lady. And it's an honor to know her, and it's an honor to be a part of her story in really opening up opportunities that allow her to thrive and for her family to thrive as well. I'd be really happy to take any questions you have. I know we have a few more minutes, but there are some key ways to get involved if you're interested. You can learn more about trafficking and prevention on our website, including signing up for our email newsletter. You can join our monthly giving program, which is called the Freedom Chapter. You can share about the importance of prevention with family and friends. If you'd like to get even more involved, there's opportunities to serve on the board or to volunteer in different capacities. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Super. Thank you so much, Lucy, and kudos to you and your team for doing the fabulous work you are. I would encourage all the attendees to ask whatever questions they would like to ask Lucy about the work they do. I'm going to put out some questions in the chat box, some suggested questions in case you want to take a look at it to see what is it that you can ask. But the floor is open now to ask some questions. Lucy, maybe I could ask you a question. Where are you seeing partnership, right? Like in terms of help, what do you need help with? And especially, I think a lot of us are joining not from Thailand. So what can we help you with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think talking about the importance of prevention as an innovative tool for tackling trafficking. A lot of anti-trafficking work is focused on removing people from situations of exploitation and providing them with aftercare and opportunities to re-enter society, all of which is really needed. But prevention is so much better than a cure, right? If we can prevent children from experiencing trafficking, not only do they never experience that trauma, but they also have opportunities to thrive and develop. So I think in terms of getting involved in the US, there are a number of ways you can host events for Freedom Story. We are actively looking for new board members at the moment if you're interested in perhaps joining a board. Those are kind of the 2 main ways that spring to my mind right now.
Hi, Lucy, can I ask a question? Thank you for the talk. I just have a question in terms of like, how do you approach the psychological factors? For example, some families might not be so receptive of help. And sometimes, these women might think that they don't have a choice. So how do you go about approaching that?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the families we work with, parents are well-intentioned and they want the best for their children, right? But they feel like they don't have a choice. They don't have and for many of them, they economically don't have any choices. And so I think it's coming alongside them to provide additional options for their family economically and doing the long-term work. We work holistically with families over a long period of time to help them understand things like the importance of delayed gratification, right? If you're living in poverty, you're focused on getting today what you need to survive and tomorrow. You're not really focused on 5 or 10 years down the line and what your life might look like because you're just living day by day. So we try to come alongside families to help them to change that mindset a little bit A few years ago, we opened a program in a new village, and the village headman was actively involved in the trafficking that was happening in the village. So that was quite challenging. But instead of trying to set ourselves up as being against him, we tried to see how can we bring him on side to understand what we're offering children. Greater opportunity for education, greater development for them and their families, more opportunities for the village so that they can break out of this cycle of survival and hopefully really develop into having choices, meaningful choices, right? For the future, for them and for the village and for the community. But that's a great question. Not everybody is on board, and not everyone is, you know, there are people in the community who benefit from cycles of trafficking, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Super, thank you. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for asking that question. And thank you, Lucy. Do we have any more questions?
If we have questions later on, can we reach out to you, or we want to, decided that we wanted to be more involved? Do you have a contact that we could probably reach out to?
Absolutely. I can put it in the chat, or it's just lucy@thefreedomstory.org. So
I can just put it in the chat, Lucy. It'll be helpful. Yeah. And super. Thank you so much, Lucy, for this wonderful presentation. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We have our next organization ready to present, and I hope they are in the room. The Red Dot Foundation.
Yes, I am here.
Super. Thank you, Camilla. So
Thank you.
just letting everyone know that you can move from room to room, but I will now request Camilla to talk about the Red Dot Foundation. Over to you, Camilla.
Thank you so much. Good morning from Brazil, everyone. I would say good evening to Lucy, probably in Thailand. It's really nice to be here with all of you. The first thing that I'll say is that I apologize. I have a really sore throat. So if at any point I mute myself, it's just because I have to cough. But thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Camilla. I'm the Tech and Data Product Manager for Red Dot Foundation. And our mission is to end violence against women and girls through education, advocacy, and crowdsourced data. So I think Lucy brought a lot of the problem already, but we at Red Dot Foundation believe that gender-based violence is a global pandemic. We've suffered one from COVID a few years ago, but gender-based violence is a pandemic that has been going around for centuries and centuries, and it's really hard to tackle it. And according to UN Women, 1 in 3 women will suffer physical or sexual abuse at least once in their lifetimes. However, I encourage you to just take a moment and think if on top of your mind, if you ever heard someone talk about at least one experience. And what I can tell you is that this number from UN Women is probably very not up to date. And the reason for that is that globally, 80% of all cases of sexual assault are not reported to the authorities, and that creates an institutional data gap. The reason for that is that when we have these big statistics, they come from police reports. But most of the times, gender-based violence does not get reported to the police unless we're talking about cases of rape or domestic violence. Those are more common to go to the police. And even those cases are not really reported to the police, many victims do not feel comfortable. They fear retaliation. They fear being re-victimized, and they do not talk to the police. In India, just to give you some examples, 88.46% of all seats in legislative assemblies are held by women, which is very little. 0.33 is the ratio of female to male participation in the labor force, again, very little. And 899 is the sex ratio at birth from female to male, sorry. And in the United States, we have the statistics that 43.6% of women have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. And that gets here in a very young age. So 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before they turn 18 years old in the United States. $10.5 billion are spent by the New York City Mayor's office for the office to end domestic violence and gender-based violence. And around $200 is what women spend in New York City to get safer transportation to go to work. So what we're talking about here is that there's a massive investment in safety. And even though there is a massive government investment in safety, women still have to spend more money than men to be safe in public transportation, for example. Besides that, 74% of stalking partners have interfered with the victim's employment. In most of those cases, victims lose their jobs. And 22% of federal employees who have experienced sexual harassment have seen a loss in productivity. So what we say is that sexual violence is a whole entire spectrum of abuse, and extreme underreporting make this problem invisible. So we're talking about catcalling, we're talking about touching, groping, taking photos, we're talking about uggling, we're talking about online harassment. And then at the other end of this, we're also talking about rape, we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about human trafficking, as Lucy already talked to us about. And the issue is, without taking action, the lack of these visible consequences really undermines our ability to protect these individuals. So without knowing what the problem is, it's really hard to tackle the problem and avoid these victims from facing harm. So what we do is we make the invisible visible by crowdsourcing stories and narratives of sexual and gender-based violence through Safe City. So Safe City is a platform, an app that you can download on your phone. You can access it through your computer, and is an anonymous, safe, and accessible way of reporting sexual violence. And today we have over 50,000 unique reports shared in our platform. It is an open data source for visualization and analytics that really help to explain the problem on a local level. You can see here with a screenshot of the map in New York City, all of these red dots with numbers are clusters of reports and clusters of violence that we can zoom in and see up to street level. So if there is a problem at 42nd with 8th Avenue in New York, we will know exactly where the problem is. And because we use Google Maps APIs, we can see exactly if that is a subway station, if that is a bar, if it's a restaurant, if it's happening near a university, for example. And what does this allow us? It allows us to have multilateral action. So because we know the problem, we can increase individual and community engagement and generate institutional accountability. So what do I mean by that? So we take data and we transform that into action. So for individuals, we provide them with a safe space to share their stories and find solidarity. One thing that we see a lot with our organizations and individuals that we work with is that by reading other people's stories, they find solidarity and they find identification of saying, okay, this didn't just happen to me. I'm part of a community here. And individuals as well, we've worked, and I'll give you some examples, with some beneficiaries who said that now they can make better decisions about their own safety and understand where are some of the places that are dangerous to go, what are some of the places that are safer for women, for example. For communities, we give them access to the information, and we work together very closely with local organizations to help them mobilize themselves, get people to understand what gender-based violence is, and then further, we help them demand for institutional accountability. And on the other hand, we also support institutions with access with actionable information on unsafe experiences. Our idea is that by using this data, they can make spaces safer. And that really increases trust in the system because victims and communities, individuals can really see a result of what they are sharing in their safety, in their public safety. So just to give you a few examples, we are today present in 20 countries, but I brought 2 case studies to help explain what do we do. So in Kenya, we empowered women and girls, and we started changing safety through religious leaders, through our partner Polycom Girls. So we work in the largest slum of Kenya, which is Kibra, and the streets were very unsafe, very full of harassment. And we started mapping these stories by sharing on paper because people didn't really have access to technology or to Wi-Fi, mobile phones. And by uploading this and analyzing this data, we were able to collaborate with various religious institutions who then educated men and boys about gender-based violence. We also went to the community radio, and then in that sense, we raised awareness. And because of that, this led to some policy changes, both in schools, and there is a law being evaluated to change the wording of the law to also mention street harassment, which is a huge issue in Kenya. In Romania, just this is another example, we work with refugees from Ukraine through Sensi Blue Foundation. So they started receiving so many refugees that are already coming from a vulnerable position, culturally very different than Romania. And they started to take these women in and started to talk to them about gender-based violence, and domestic violence was a big thing that they were suffering. Violence on their way to Romania was also another thing that they faced. And by talking to refugees, we were able to understand both how they felt safe in Romania or unsafe, and by understanding what made them feel unsafe in their new country, we were able to collaborate with law enforcement. So bringing the institutional accountability to help them bridge and understand the cultural differences between Romanians and Ukrainians, and how could the police force be supportive to Ukrainian women who were facing domestic violence. So just to explain what we're doing, we're doing systems change. So through data, we engage communities and institutions to get actionable results. Our impact, we have impacted over 1.5 million people so far, have trained 250,000 people, have 50,000 plus reports. We work with youth leaders and police as well. And as I said, we are present in 20 countries, and we have a really great following on social media. We do social media advocacy as well, so feel free to follow us and engage with us in that sense. And I also wanted to invite you to be a part of this active change. We are welcoming brand ambassadors or community champions. And we're also welcoming volunteers on technology developments for Safe City, fundraising, marketing, and community work. So please feel free to reach out. And yes, I would just take some time now to answer a few questions if you have any. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. Thank you so much, Camilla. And kudos to you and your team for doing the fabulous work you are doing. 1.5 million people impacted. That's a huge number. Super, super congratulations. And I'll leave the floor open for any questions now, if anybody has. I think, Camilla, you already shared how can people get involved with the project, with the Red Dot Foundation. I think maybe even if you could leave your information here in the chat box. That'll be great. But if anybody has questions, please feel free to ask Camilla. We have another minute or two before we have the next speaker join us. Camilla, tell me, what is the process of someone opening a chapter or joining their local chapter?
Yeah, so we work with local organizations. The biggest thing is for you to be either an organization or an individual that is a community leader. Then we would just have a session, we'll do some strategy planning for the collection of data and for community engagement, but it's fairly simple. We'll sign an MOU, and we have support groups for the chapters who want to understand a little bit more how they can take the data collection process into place, what are some of the activities, and then we also host online virtual events together, raise funds together. So if any of you are interested, just reach out to me via email and we can get that done.
Super, super. Thank you so much. And Camilla, I'm based out of India, so if you need any help in India at any point of time, please feel free to connect with me. My email address is programs@Harvard Global We. You can just reach out to anyone you connected at Global We, and we're happy to help you out here with the Indian chapter. But that's it for now. Thank you so much, Camilla, for presenting the work, the fabulous work you're doing at the Red Dot Foundation. If I can next invite Mary Elizabeth Estrada to talk to us about Women's Earth and Climate Action Network.
Wonderful. I'm just going to really quickly share my screen. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Well, hello, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here with you all today. I know it's bright and early for some of us, but I know for others it might be midday or even maybe evening. I'm not sure. But anyways, my name is Mary Elizabeth Estrada. I go by Mary Liz for short. I live on Seminole and Tocobaga territory, or so-called Tampa, Florida. And I am the Research and Policy Associate with Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, or WECAN. And I hold a master's in global sustainability with a concentration in sustainability policy from the University of South Florida. And today I'm really excited to be here with you all because I'm going to be sharing more about WECAN and some of our amazing programs and ways to get involved. Okay, cool. So what is WECAN? Well, WECAN is a solutions-based organization aimed at engaging women on a global scale. And we do this through policy advocacy, on-the-ground projects, trainings, and movement building for climate justice. Our work really centers the expertise and the leadership of Indigenous women, of Black and Brown women, of women from the Global South, and women from low-income communities who are really on the front lines of climate change. And so why do we specifically focus on women, right? So women are actually impacted first and worst by climate change, and yet we know that so many of their stories go untold, despite their incredible contributions on a local and global scale. And study after study has actually shown that if we involve women at every level, we are better able to really radically transform our society to be more just, to be more equitable, and address climate change. And so some disproportionate impacts really show up with women. When we look at displacement, we see that up to 80% of climate refugees are women. We also see that when it comes to health, women and children are more susceptible to environmental pollution. And we also see during and after disasters that women and children are 14 times more likely than men to die from a natural disaster. And women also face disproportionate levels of gender-based violence as well. which all of these impacts really puts women in a position of carrying more knowledge and wisdom in knowing how to address these issues, which is why it's really disappointing to see that only 12% of government-based environmental roles are held by women. And so we have a wide range of programs. We focus on a lot of different things, as you can see. So we do some reforestation projects to protect old growth forests. We also have programs around divestment and fossil fuel resistance, as well as advocating for feminist climate policy at the United Nations, and even Indigenous rights to and food sovereignty. And just to share a few examples with you all, our Women for Forest program supports reforestation efforts led by frontline women directly. And so we have these programs in the Amazon rainforest, in Ecuador and Brazil, the Itambwe rainforest in the DRC, and the Tongass rainforest in North America. And so these frontline women are not only able to protect the forest from extractive industries, they're also able to maintain their livelihoods and also protect their communities from really the worst impacts of climate change. One of our other programs involves divestment and fossil fuel resistant, which really highlights the power and the role of women in protecting water, land, climate, and their communities. And WeCan in the past has led actions alongside frontline women against Keystone XL pipeline, Dakota Access, and Line 3. And currently, WeCan is directly involved with frontline women against Line 5 pipeline in the Great Lakes and the Mountain Valley pipeline in Appalachia. And so those are just a couple of our programs. But WeCan is also really focused on shifting the narrative around climate action, which brings us to our Women Speak database, which is really a collection of stories from women on the front lines, providing interviews and case studies and really initiatives that are led by women to ensure that we have access to all of the wide-ranging solutions. And so essentially our database, it's a free web-based database, and it's a collection of articles, interviews, videos, reports, case studies, and it really highlights and showcases climate solutions from women on the front lines through a feminist lens. And Women Speak was really created to highlight stories that are often left out of the conversation. And much of the climate solutions that exist really remain undocumented and unpublished. And so this resource really highlights those stories all in one place. And so really this database is open for anybody to use. But you know, obviously it's very helpful for journalists and policymakers and students, as well as educators. You know, even if you're an activist and you're looking for solutions to implement in your community, it's a really helpful resource to check out. And we also follow a very strict criteria in making sure that everything that goes into this database, you know, follows climate justice principles and avoids adding solutions that are greenwashing or consumption-based or false solutions. And so we really try to uplift women's stories from diverse political and economic backgrounds. And so these are just some of our story categories. As you can see, we have quite a few, you know, from food justice to Indigenous traditional knowledge, to renewable energy, to climate policy, and several others, as you can see. So if you're, you know, again, if you're a student looking for case studies to use for a report, or if you're an activist trying to implement different solutions in your community, this is a really great place to look for solutions from women directly. And so if you're interested in getting involved with WeCan, we do have several volunteer internship opportunities that include our Women Speak program that I just mentioned, where students or interns will research articles and case studies and highlight the most important things. So they'll write summaries on these stories. And so essentially it's a really good position for people who love writing. And then with our social media internship, that person would work very closely with our communications coordinator to help create posts and captions, as well as help to support digital storytelling, which is really amazing. And finally, if internships are not your vibe, we have so many other ways to plug in through our webinars and panels and member calls, which we all have listed on our website. And we do host very frequently, and we also record most of them, so they go on our YouTube and our Facebook if folks are interested. And so if you are wanting to stay connected with us, wanting to see what upcoming events we have, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Our website has the Women Speak database, several other resources. We also have reports if people are interested in checking those out. And you can sign up for our newsletter as well on our website. And I just want to say before I close out that I believe that we're really at a turning point, and now more than ever, we need to strengthen our commitment to a collective vision. I think so many of the women that are presenting today have so many powerful programs and initiatives, and we really have to also intersect our issues and work on them together, because that's really the best way to address societal issues, is to really catch it at its root core and make sure that we're collectively fighting towards Earth's diverse ecosystems and communities. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out, but I'm so grateful to have been here with you all today, and I will be happy to take any questions.
Super. Thank you so much, Mary Elizabeth, and congratulations to you and your entire team for the fabulous work you do at We Can. There's, like they say, we only have one earth to live on, and we need to protect it as much as we can. And you rightly said that women bear the biggest brunt of climate change. And so I'll leave the floor open for questions. Anybody? Maybe I'll ask you one. Do you feel, what are the challenges you face while working on your mission and working alongside local governments and stuff like that? Do you think that that's a challenge?
So we don't always work with local governments per se. But I mean, I can tell you that with any advocacy efforts that we've been a part of, they're always going to be challenging, just because even though you're bringing all the voices that are directly impacted to the table, doesn't necessarily mean that the policymakers or the elected officials are going to side with your stance on certain issues, or are going to support the policy that you're trying to propose. So that's been a really big challenge, I think, is just, even though we're bringing people to the table to have their voice heard, is not having their voice heard still, because oftentimes we see that so many of these politicians have special interests in their pockets. So that's been a big challenge.
Sure. And that's like a global problem, right? It's not a continent or a country specific problem. I hear you. Another question is, could you highlight, what has been your most important takeaway from the time you've sort of spent with We Can?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, right now I've really been working on a divestment report, and we've been focused on researching several of almost 10 to 15 different case studies on fossil fuel projects currently in North America that are really wreaking havoc on people's health and people's livelihoods. And we're taking a look at the gendered and racial impacts of a lot of these fossil fuel companies and how local communities are really suffering, with cancers and various health implications. And so that's been a really big part. And in the next couple months, we're going to have it released, but we're also right now in the midst of interviewing people. And so that's been very powerful, is just hearing from women directly and giving them a voice and being able to highlight that in our report.
Super fabulous, fabulous work. Does anyone else have questions? All right, so just in time, we've already got the news to sort of shut down the breakout rooms. But thank you so much, Mary Elizabeth, for sharing the fabulous work you do at Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. And thank you, everyone, for joining our breakout room number 2. We heard 3 fabulous people speak about the committed work they're doing. And it was really enriching, for me at least, at a personal level, to join in and listen to all the wonderful work they've been doing. So thank you so much. And I'll request everyone to go back to the main room for our closing comments.